Hi, how's it going? Today I'm going to show you the proper methods and techniques to achieve fire by friction using the hand drill method. First, let's talk about some of the pieces that you'll need. You'll need a spindle. This spindle is made from Soltol, and then my fireboard is made from yucca, but the Soltol stocks I found are usually much straighter than the yucca. This will work if you're using yucca on yucca, Soltol on Soltol, or any combination. This is the best and most abundant resource in my area, and that's why I use it. So first, when we're talking about the spindle, you want to choose one that's straight, and then also one that doesn't exceed the diameter of your pinky. The length can vary, but generally you want to go something about the length of your arm. As you refine your technique, you can go shorter and shorter. The fireboard, like I said, is made from yucca. So this is just from one big yucca stock split down on both sides to make a board. The thickness of the board should be between a 1/4 inch and 5/8 of an inch. There are some advantages and disadvantages when going too thin or too thick. If you're going on the thinner side, one big advantage that you'll get is that the board itself doesn't draw away too much heat as you're creating the friction, so you'll be able to get your ignition point a lot faster. The disadvantage of going with a thin board is that you run the risk of drilling through the board before you get ignition. An advantage of having a thick board is that you're not going to drill through the board, and that you can also get multiple uses from the same hole. And then, like I said, the disadvantage of having a thick board is that the board itself will draw the heat away from your friction, making it take a lot longer to get ignition from the friction. Myself, I tend to try and stay a bit in the middle, usually around a 1/2 inch, which is a little on the thicker side, but I can usually get two fires from one hole, and that's why I do it. Another thing that you'll need is something to catch the ember. I just have a little piece of split wood from this elm that I split up for the fire. And then you want to make sure that you have all your materials already in place. So here I have a bird's nest tinder bundle made from cedar bark, and then my fire is already pre-built and ready to go. So let's talk about getting the spindle set up. The first thing you want to do is cut it to length, about the length of your arm. You want to smooth everything out. You want to take off any rough edges, any pieces where a stick or twig might be, depending on the material you're using. Make sure it's nice and smooth. The thicker end is the side that we're going to use on the fireboard. The reason for this is that you're able to put more pressure down as the spindle flares out towards the bottom. It's a lot easier to get more pressure into the fireboard. To prep the end of the spindle, this is something I do for the Soltol and the yucca. It has a softer middle part, and it's easier to do this, but you want to cut it off straight and then just round off the edges. And then something I'll do is place my knife on the end and just twist to take out a small chunk of the center. The reason I do this is it focuses the friction around the outside where I'm collecting dust, and it allows me to get the ember much quicker that way. As you can see, I've used the spindle before. If you're using the spindle over and over, you're going to develop a polish around the edge. You want to make sure that you take that polish off. So go ahead and prep that, scrape that polish off, rough up the edge, This will allow the spindle to get more friction with the fireboard and create more heat. Once you get that polished edge, you're losing a lot of your friction. So if you find that you're having a hard time, you may want to stop, reset, and prepare your material again. Alright, so now that our spindle is ready to go, we'll focus on the fireboard. As you can see, I've got quite a few hand drill fires off this fireboard already. So if the fireboard's not the thickness that you want to make sure that you shave it down to the thickness that you're comfortable with. If you're doing this for the first time, I would recommend going a little bit on the thinner side. If you drill through the fireboard, no big deal, just make another one a little bit thicker. Alright, so once the fireboard is the thickness that you want, you can do two things. You can place the tip of your knife where you want your hole to be, and then make circles all the way around to make an indentation. Something that I like to do with the yucca, since it's fairly soft, is I'll place the spindle where I want my hole, and then I'll take the tip of my knife and I'll mark indentions all the way around. And then once I have those indentions, I'll connect them all together to make a circle. And then I'll take a thin layer off the top. Alright, so once you have your indentation made, now you need to burn in your hole. So get in a nice comfortable position. You can either do this from a kneeling or a sitting position. Place one foot on the fireboard and put your spindle inside your indentation. And then, starting slow with lots of pressure, start making the start of your hole. And then once you know the spindle is going to stay in place, you can pick up a little speed. Lots of pressure still. And then I'll keep doing this until I see a little bit of smoke. Alright, once I see smoke, my hole's burned in, and now it's time to cut the notch. So when I cut my notches, I'll start the notch almost right to the center, just shy of the center. And then I always mark my notches first, and then I cut them out. So what I'm going to mark is a skinny V, making about between a sixth and an eighth of the pie. So if you think about your indentation as a pumpkin pie, you want to cut about a sixth to an eighth out of that pie. So I'll mark my first V on the top, and then on the side of the fireboard, what I want to do is I want to flare that notch out towards the bottom. The reason you want to flare it out is the dust that you're collecting will collect much easier in a flared out notch, because it'll form a like a miniature mound or pyramid inside. And then the other advantage is that it allows more oxygen in from the bottom. And then I'll connect my lines on the bottom, making a wider V, and I want it to extend about to where I think the middle of the hole is going to be. So once you make your marks on your fireboard, you should have a skinny V on the top, a trapezoid on the side, and a fat V on the bottom. So once I get those marked, I'll go ahead and cut them out. When you're cutting your notches, you want to make sure that you're not putting any leverage side to side, especially if you're carving next to another hole that you've already used. If you put any leverage side to side, you have the potential to break off chunks of your fireboard. As you can see here, all those pieces are broken off because if you get your holes really close together, there's not much holding those chunks of wood on. So eventually, those pieces in between will probably break off, but as you're cutting your notch, you just want to make sure that you don't put any leverage side to side. So once you cut your notch, it should look just like that. Flared out at the bottom, skinny V on the top, wide V on the bottom. Let's talk a little bit about technique. There's two methods that you can use. The first is utilizing the full length of the spindle, just like I did when I formed the indention. So what you want to do is get comfortable. You want to get fairly close to it. This way your body weight can be the driving force in putting the pressure down on the fireboard, rather than being far away and your arms having to do all the work. So right here, you're just utilizing your body weight to make it a little more comfortable. So with this method, you're always going to start at the top. You want to use the full length of your hand all the way across to the fingertips and back down, putting pressure all the way to the bottom of the spindle. One thing to keep in mind, if you are feeling hot spots or areas on your hand that are starting to hurt, you think you might get a blister, you can always utilize different surface areas of your hand also. You can use the top, the middle, and the bottom. And you can move it around if you think that it might help in preventing injuries to your hands. The other method is called the floating hand technique. And basically, all you're going to do is start with a V, use the full length of your hand until you have an A, and then reset that A back into a V. This will actually allow you to climb up the spindle, but as you're putting downward pressure, it allows you to stay in the same spot. What I'm going to use is a combination of both methods. As I start, I'll use the floating hand technique, and I'll just generate heat and I'll generate dust. And then once I have enough dust collected in the notch, then I'll transition and use the full length of the spindle to get a lot more downward pressure and a lot more speed, so that I can get an ember going. Alright, so you want to make sure that you have your catch placed underneath your notch. Place a foot over the fireboard to keep everything in place. Make sure that you're comfortable, that you can get your body weight close to the spindle, and then begin. So as I use this floating hand technique, I'm just staying nice and relaxed, and I'm just generating heat and I'm generating dust. I'm not in any rush to put a lot of pressure or anything down onto the fireboard. Just generating heat, generating dust. Staying nice, relaxed, and comfortable. Okay, and once I have enough dust collected, then I'll transition. You want to make sure that the spindle stays in fireboard as you reset. You want to keep going until the smoke continues even after you stop. Alright, so once the smoke continues, even after you stop, you can remove the spindle. And then gently remove the ember from the fireboard. And there's no need to rush or panic. This ember should burn for several minutes. So I'm going to stay calm and relaxed and transfer it into my tinder bundle. Alright. You want to make sure you don't smother it, but gently close your tinder bundle around it, and then start adding oxygen. You can do this by blowing into the tinder bundle, but this is a little more gentle. You run less of a risk of blowing out your ember. And you just want to make sure that you're still seeing smoke come out of the tinder bundle. And then once I start seeing a lot more smoke, then I'll transition and I'll start blowing air into the tinder bundle. And then once my tinder bundle ignites, I'll go ahead and add it to the tinder in my pre-built fire. And there you have it. That's how the hand drill is done. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.